All right, let's start with a serious question here. What you've won, Gene, because I know you won the national title, you won the world championships, and as a pro, to be quite honest, both our careers seem the same. As you pointed out, we made the top 10 of the Olympia. We were closer to 10th than what we were first. And we seem to have a lot of similarities, actually. So I'm interested to know what you won.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky with my national Swiss championship title, which, I mean, I was for years and years and years the best bodybuilder in Switzerland, but I never went to the Swiss championships. Often we had the qualification for the Miss Universe and the Swiss championship was not on the same day. So I went to the Swiss championship once, but failed the drug test. It's a sad story.
Okay.
So I was really prepared to pass the drug test. And 6 months before, I took very, very, very little steroid at this time. This was in my early 20s. We talk about like 250 milligram of testosterone and 300 milligram of DECA maybe. So I knew I have to be very careful with certain things. They're longer in the system. So I took no DECA for about a year, which I was told. So I tested positive on DECA, which was very, very strange to me. What happened is one of the testosterones I took from Eastern Germany was fake. And that made me test positive. So although I was by far the best athlete in Switzerland, I was the title was annulled. Then the next 2 years, when I went to the next 2000, I went to the Miss Universe. It was not the qualification was not together with the Swiss championships, so I never went back to that. So sadly, I'm not even Swiss champion. It's very, very sad. But I did win the Miss Universe in '94.
So you simply did the qualifications for the universe.
Yeah.
But you had failed the drug test as well. I'm not understanding.
No. I only failed the drug test once at the Swiss championships.
Right.
And then never went back to the Swiss championships.
Right.
Never really cared about it. And the next couple of times I went to the Miss Universe, it was on a separate date in a disco. We had to go qualify. And I won both shows there and qualified for the Swiss national team in '93 and '94. '93, I lost against Gunther Schlierkampf. And in '94, I won the heavyweight and the overall at the Miss Universe. What qualified me directly for the Olympia. So pretty much my fifth show was the Olympia.
Okay, that is interesting. And tell us about your family or family business, if you wish to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from the very south of Switzerland. We have a state system like the United States. Our state is one of the 3 states which is in the Alps. The Alps only touch Switzerland in the south. So I'm from one of the mountain states, which was very isolated till about late 90s, where we finally got a tunnel, connecting us with the outside world.
Okay.
It's a very interesting part of Switzerland. We were not even part of Switzerland till the late 1900s. We were owned by the Catholic Church, first by Napoleon. And Napoleon wanted no part of us because we never paid taxes. He sent the army to our mountain area. We killed all the tax collectors from France. They killed half of our men in our town. So he then gave us a gift to the Catholic Church. So we were kind of a country or a land between 2 countries, between Italy and Switzerland. And then finally joined, like in the late 1800s, we finally joined Switzerland. So, we feel very special. And we also have a total different language than anybody else in Switzerland. We are between France and Switzerland. So we use a lot of French words. We have a very rural kind of dialect. So if we talk normal, nobody in Switzerland understands us. Okay. So, that's that. So my family, very middle class. We had pretty much three big factories or three big companies ruling that valley. You either worked for the Swiss train company, you worked for the postal office, or you worked for a company called Lonza, which made aluminium for Audi, Volkswagen, and Porsche. Those are the three options you pretty much had. I think everybody even had the same salary, as I grew up. And the only kind of mentionable thing or kind of about the area is we have some famous ski resorts there. So there's certain towns which up to 200,000 people in the winter live there, little towns of 5,000. So we had kind of that connection to the outside world, but that was pretty much it. My father was an electrician for the Swiss train company. My mother was a housewife and was a waitress on weddings. Nothing worth mentioning, really.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
I have a sister, which is about my age. She's 2 or 3 years younger. Looks way better and younger than me. I have no idea why. So that's kind of how I grew up.
Well, you look like you've kept you've aged well. I'm not even sure how old you are, but I was very surprised when I started seeing you on Facebook, and I thought this guy hasn't aged. I saw you standing there with a woman, and I thought he was competing years ago. He actually looks younger now than when he was competing. So what is your age?
Yeah, it's I'm 55.
Really? Very 55.
I do quite a few things to kind of slow down the aging. We can go into that later. I'm obsessed with peptides, anti-aging things, So, and one thing I think is also good, what helps me is I had to retire, as we all know, very early. So back in those days when I was on those hard diets, like you say, I looked older than I do now. But, it's a rough lifestyle, especially when you compete twice a year. You're pretty much on diets all the time. You train like an animal. You take stuff which is not on the healthy side, let's put it this way. So I was really, really trying to live a healthy lifestyle and do things very much in moderation. I not even work out a lot. I work out 3 times a week, 45 minutes. Now.
Okay.
I use my bike a lot. I just try to stay healthy on the inside. And I can tell, sometimes when I'm on a vacation or so, I work out a little bit more, but then right away start tweaking here or there. I really try to figure out for myself, we will find out if it's the right way, how do I turn into Bill Pearl? How can I be healthy and be over 90? I really want to be an old man sitting on my porch and take care of my animals. I never had this attitude. You heard it before. I would give away 5-10 years for an Olympia title, anything like that. I never felt that way. I never felt that way.
No, I get that, and I agree with you with what you're saying and what you're doing. It's
so that's why I was even careful during my career, although you were even more careful, as I found out as we talked last time. But I really felt like I was extremely cautious. Not just that I was kind of more cautious than others. I was also convinced it's the right way to go. But then again, retiring early definitely helped.
What age was that? What age was your retirement?
So I was really serious till 99. I was 32 years old. Then I was hanging out another 2 or 3 years, kind of as a part-time bodybuilder. I was still under Weider contract. Okay. So with 35, I was completely done.
Okay. So you actually had a Weider contract?
I had a Weider contract for close to 10 years.
Now, tell me, how did that work, if you don't mind me asking? What if you can divulge what you got paid, how it all worked, how it came about? Because it's very interesting, because he treats some people a certain way, and then other people seem like they've been treated totally different. Some people think the world of him. Some people have the opposite.
I'm on the side. I think the world of him. So I can only guess why. I mean, why he treated me so well, but he had an unbelievable belief in me that I can be that next Arnold Schwarzenegger. So also maybe what helped a little bit, before Joe Weider already, I had great contracts with, I was with a company, Ultimate Nutrition. Here, I think they went bankrupt, but there was a great company at the time. So first, I had contracts with Ultimate Nutrition Europe, which was a kind of two-way contract. I got paid to be one of their athletes, but I also sold a lot of supplements. So in 1 year, my partners and I, we sold Ultimate Nutrition products in Switzerland for like $8 billion.
Wow.
So I made really, really good money with Ultimate Nutrition. Then when I met Weider the first time, I got a fax that was before the Arnold's Classic in 90. No, I got the fax after the Miss Universe in 94. And he offered me $24,000 for a year. And I weigh $24,000 a year.
For the year.
Which in Switzerland is pretty much less than homeless people get. You know, it's a very, very expensive country. And I did so well with Ultimate Nutrition. They also treated me very well. And I said pretty much, no, thank you. This is not anything I can survive on in Switzerland. So I didn't hear from him for a while. Then in early 96, I went to the Arnold's Classic and didn't place well, but I looked sensational. You know, I didn't have an idea really of how to dial in for a show. I just was the biggest monster on stage. Turned out only to be ninth, but, you know, in my defense, the competitor field was unbelievable. You know, there was John Ray placing fifth, Andy Münzer placing seventh, you know, Vince Taylor, Flex Wheeler, Kevin Lebroni, Paul Dillette, Porter Cortrell, I think, who placed second at the Night of Champions, just beat me by a hair. I beat him, I think, a week after. So it was hard. And, you know, when you come in too big, you don't know how to dial in against those kind of pros. It's hard. But I left a mark. Joe Weider saw me backstage, invited me to come to his office. So I flew over to California. And he offered me something in the, I don't know the details, 50,000 maybe, something like that. And I said, no, thank you. I have absolutely no interest. At that point, I was with Ultimate Nutrition worldwide. And they took care of me. I was the only athlete, I think, bodybuilder they had at the time. Everywhere I went for them, I was picked up with a limo. I made over $100,000 of that contract. And I had the supplement business on the side. So I did very, very, very well. Then I went to the Olympia. And it was a very strange Olympia in 96. The 96 Olympia was not drug tested for steroids, but it was drug tested for diuretics. They also first announced that they may do a blood test. So all of us were in sheer panic, you know, so nobody knew what's going to happen. I did it once before in Los Angeles. Do you remember? 89, 90, around that time?
90, I think 1990.
Yeah. And other than, I think, Labrada and Mike Christian, nobody really looked good that show compared to before. Even Lee Haney was quite a bit on the lighter side than usual.
I think Sean Ray looked good, Mike Christian, Lee Labrada, and Francis Benfata all looked really good.
Yeah. But I know Lee Haney was quite a bit downsized that year.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. But then they dropped the drug test. They brought it back in 96. And I do remember talking to the guys. Everybody was in panic, especially this announcement of a possible blood test. At the end, only Nasser failed the drug test. I went into the show really like absolutely zero diuretics. There was also other things like clenbuterol, drugs like cocaine and that kind of stuff was on the list. But you could tell people had issues. They were a little bit either lighter or not as hard, with the exception of Dorian was very hard, but he was clearly downsized. Sean Ray was...
Dorian as well.
Dorian was downsized quite a bit in 96. Yeah, absolutely. 96, yeah. 95, I think, was his best shape, not his biggest, but his best shape. 96 was downsized, and Nasser looked out of this freaking world.
Can we just backtrack there? You think Dorian looked his best in 95? That's when he already had one or two torn muscles? I thought he's...
You have to look... You can look at it from two sides. size-wise, no torn muscles, 93 was clear the best. But when it comes to sharpness, hardness, still full, 95 was his best. But then when you consider the torn muscle, 93 was his best, absolutely. But he was so sharp in 95. I mean, 95, he had, 94, he almost lost. I mean, not by the judges, but by the opinion of a lot of people who were there.
Yes.
He tore the muscle, I think, before the 94 contest and had a tough time drying up for that show.
Yeah.
But in 95, he was dry as it gets, because I was qualified for the 95 Olympia in Atlanta, but didn't feel like doing it. What was a mistake? I felt like I'm not big enough. I went to see the Olympia, saw it from close up, and Dorian was really unbelievable, So 96, he was downsized from that. It was not quite as dry than at the 95 Olympia. And Nasser this is the best Nasser I've ever seen. But Nasser took the diuretics. He's like, I don't care, because there was an agreement between the Pro League and us athletes that everything will stay secret. If you don't pass the test, we will take the money away from you, but you keep your placing. Nobody will find out. You will just not get the money. So Nasser, smart as he was, he said, I don't care about the money. I want to win the Mr. Olympia. So we all went to the athletes meeting, and Wayne DeMiglia stood up and said, well, actually, we can't quite do that the way we planned. It has to go public, and you will not just lose your money, you will use your ranking as well. Nasser jumped off his seat and was absolutely outraged. And Wayne said, why you have to worry? Did you take diuretics? Nasser, that's not the point. The point is with an agreement. So on stage, I believe that was the reason why they put Sean Ray as a buffer between Dorian and Nasser, because nobody was certain if Dorian will pass the test. Everybody was certain that Nasser will not pass the test. So they put him they didn't want the first two be disqualified. And so they put Ray in between. The Ray was very good, but not as good as 94, for example. So that's kind of my take on that. Then Nasser went on to the European tour, and it was some of the best bodybuilding in history of bodybuilding. What he delivered to the 96 tour, especially at the end in Russia, in Germany, I mean, it was just out of this world. 97, when he came back, where everybody said he was his best, I disagree. He was already a little bit watery in the shoulders from site injections. He was a little bit softer in the back. He was very, very big. The only reason he came maybe closer to Dorian was clearly a mess, in 97, So, then 96. So I placed 8 in 96. Since I was so far too big at the Arnold's, I decided to come in a little bit too small. But to come back to your question, so I got this offer after the Arnold's Classic, about $50,000. I had no interest in doing so. But before the 96 Olympia, I went to his office again. And he always gave out 1-year contracts, I think with the exception of Lou Ferrigno at that time. Even Dorian had a 1-year contract. So he gave me the same contract Dorian had, something in the $86,000 a year plus doubling the prize money. And this was then gotten close to what I had from Ultimate Nutrition. With Ultimate Nutrition, I had to do quite a bit of work selling products and stuff. And I started to slowly be afraid that this may affect my career if I don't join. I can't say one way or another. So I did take the 4-year contract before the Olympia in 96. And then I never had a problem to have that contract renewed pretty much till up to 2002, even when I wasn't successful anymore after 99. The contract was renewed and renewed every year. So I was with him for 8-9 years.
Very good. And
yeah.
did you still stay with Ultimate Nutrition, or you could only do one or the other?
No, I could only do one or the other.
Okay.
Later on, they started to separate like magazine contracts from supplement contracts. Yes. I think it was in the Jay Cutler kind of era when this started. But for us, we had to represent Weider products. There were like 8 different products here. He had 8 different product lines. So, and we were not allowed to.
8 different brothers.
No, product lines, supplement lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. We all know he only had one brother. Yeah. So,
I did want to ask you. Sorry for interrupting. Who inspired you to start? There must have been somebody, a figure, someone who.
Oh, absolutely.
Inspire.
Absolutely. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I was 9, 10 years old, and I went to the public pool. Our lifeguard, it was a very large public pool, 2,000 people a day were visiting that pool. Our lifeguard, his name was Roger Albrecht. He was middleweight Swiss champion and one of the most talented bodybuilders I've ever seen. Unfortunately, mentally a little bit of a mess. I hope he forgives me for that. We're still friends today. He was unbelievable. I mean, his forearms, his neck, and his arms. And this is a guy also who maybe took, for 3 weeks a year or 5 weeks a year, half a D-ball a day. They had no idea what they were doing. They were just great, naturally gifted athletes. Yeah. So when I saw the guy walking around, I knew this is what I want to be. The problem was I was very talented in many sports. I played hockey on Wednesdays and Saturdays. I played soccer 4 times a week, had a game on the weekend. I wasn't a great skier, but I skied Wednesday during the day, Saturday and Sunday, whenever I didn't have a hockey or a soccer game. So I had a lot of options. Okay. And with 9, there's just no way I didn't have access to any gym. Although I tried at home as much as I could with chin-ups, push-ups, all of that stuff, but it didn't really do much. So it took another 5 years till I was finally allowed to join the local gym. The first workout was done by the light heavyweight Swiss champion, Christoph Oberholzer. Not as crazy as Roger, but the guy had humongous arms, and he showed me all the exercises, and I knew that day. I looked at the pictures on the wall. It was Lee Haney, Tom Platz. He said, I want to be as good as those people. And I never went back to a soccer practice. I never went back to a hockey practice again, really. I was focusing 100% on bodybuilding from day one on.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So please tell us back then how you trained. I want to know what sort of loads you used, rep range, tempo, anything different that you did that we don't hear about, perhaps.
Everybody trained the same way in my valley. So we did the pyramid system, 4 exercises, 4 sets. Every muscle the same. Biceps could have possibly been 3 exercises, 4 sets. With slow progressive overload, every set a little bit more weight. And even everybody, I think, did the same exercises. It was chest, bench press, flies, incline, bench press, flies, 4 sets each. So I started early on doing changes to that. Our valley was very interesting. We had a lot of Swiss champions in that little valley. And if you would, there was an assembly of great body parts in my valley like you would not have believed. We had the guy with the huge chest, Pius. I mean, world-class chest, like in the Franco Colombo kind of mold kind of chest. We had the guy with the huge arms. We had Image Rene with legs close to Tom Platz. But we had no complete bodybuilders.
Okay.
So I started to design my program. They all had the little quirks, but everyone trained kind of the same way, but they all had the little ideas. I remember the guy with the big legs. So on Sunday, when the gym was closed, he was loading up the hacksmith, worked his way up, warm-up sets to only like machine fully loaded up that you can only do 2 or 3 repetitions. Then he went outside, he took his bike, and our gym was right at the entrance of a mountain pass. He was sprinting up that mountain on the bike as far as he could, rolled back to the gym, went underneath the hacksmith, and did a set like Dorian Yates style, total muscle failure. And that was it. And the legs grew and grew and grew. So I tried that a few times. It's absolutely murderous. So I started to early in feel like maybe I can do less with the kind of intensity we train. So the first thing I did was cutting my workouts in half. Instead of 4 sets per exercise, 2 sets per exercise. And then later on, I even went to 1 set per exercise. But I was always a little bit unsure. I grew and I grew, but nobody else really trained like that. I didn't hear from Dorian Yates and his system. There was we started reading about Mike Manzer, but nobody really knew what the truth is. And, but I did start reducing about 2 years into the workout, 3 years into my training. I started to reduce sets to about half that. And later on, I went even further. I did a little bit more exercises, like for back 7 exercises, for chest 4, for legs 4, but only 1 set. But, it looked like always 2 or 3 warm-up sets and then 1 set to muscle failure. Because I just didn't see this whole, I did 4 sets for bench press, for example, early in the pyramid system. I was always kind of holding back, and then the last set was really the all-out set. So in that sense, I realized pretty quickly I don't need all those kind of approach sets. So they worked out very, very well till late 98, but we're jumping about a couple of years now. We'll get to that later, why I had to go back to a more volume kind of training. Today, if I could go back in time, we can't. I don't know if I would have probably trained a little less intense and keep that early pyramid system with the more sets in place. I think it would be probably a little bit healthier because, I did things like 340 kilo at the also 7th exercise for deadlifts. It's just not necessary to do this crazy stuff there. It would be better probably do 4 sets with half the weight, more concentrated, better negatives or slower negatives. But, I did to the best of my knowledge at the time I really believed in. And it worked out quite great for a long time, or for quite a bit.
What was the tempo of these exercises?
I read the studies of Arthur Jones early in with the 3 or 4 second negative, like slightly more explosive positive. He always described it that if you do a set of 12 reps, for the first 10 reps, you should be able, if somebody would ask you to stop the weight at any point.
Yes.
This is the kind of control you should have. So I sticked with that from the moment on I read it. I was always doing a very concentrated 3 or 4 second negative motion and a little bit slightly more explosive positive motion. Pretty much kept that through my whole career, even today when I train.
Okay, that is interesting. Can you tell us about the squatting accident?
Well, we're jumping many years now, but the squatting accident. So it only happened because I wasn't focusing on bodybuilding anymore. So, I was still having that Weider contract. I didn't compete really in 3 years. And Weider started to get a little, not that he got impatient, but, in 2001, I used excuses not to compete. I had no interest in bodybuilding anymore. I kept the contract because nobody asked me to, they just kept continuing, renewing the contract. And it helped me to get my green card. So it would have been a little bit more difficult.
Okay.
But I started my business here, my personal training business. I had 5 trainers working for me at some times, and I was not focusing on bodybuilding. So once a year, I went to the photo shoot. And the first time, I think it was also the time when Joe Weider lost a little bit control of his company. He's gotten older. Lawyers started to talk into his business. A lot of voices, I think, in the company were against those contracts for athletes. Why the hell do we have to give those people that money? Because Joe Weider's attitude was, look, if I give those people money, they can somewhat focus on the sport like other athletes do. But did he really need to do that at that time? Probably not, but he just kept it, and the pressure on him. He told me a couple of times that people are pressuring him, that, you know, I don't deliver on stage anymore, to take the contract away from me. So every time when this photo shoots showed up or came up, I started to kind of focus a little bit more, and then go to the photo shoots, and still looked really good. But in 2003 or 2002, I wasn't great. I wasn't great anymore. And I did this leg video a week before. And I realized when I did 700-pound squats or so the week before, it's unusually heavy, you know, but I did it. And then I went to the photo shoot and then wanted to do squats. So I did the same amount of the same weight for squats. And as I was about to pack in and leave, Chris Lund asked me if I could do it again. They didn't like the lighting. They could quickly switch the lighting to the other side, do it again. And 4 or 5 minutes passed. It was quite chilly in the gym. It was in Fullerton. I think the whole backside was open. And instead of taking the weights off, starting over again, it's like, let's get just through this quickly. Let's do 2 reps just to get the shot in. I took the weight out, and I never experienced anything like it. You know, the amount of weight felt like I had a mountain on my shoulders. It was crushing me, just standing there, absolutely like crushing me, like almost something unreal, like an evil force, like crazy. And as I went down, everything started to slow down and start to kind of around me. Everything was like in slow motion around me, like a really outer body experience almost. As I was in a 90-degree angle or spot to come back up, my left quad above the knee tore completely. And I was like really like watching it almost. All my weight came to the right side, and the leg just snapped in a weird way, and it was not a clean tear there. It was just like a really crazy. The doctor described it later on, like, you know, there was not a tear he's ever seen before. It was like a bomb exploded in my knee, the right side. The right side they could never fix. You know, they tried as good as they could, and that was pretty much it. Then I ended up on my back, and I was extremely happy that, you know, at that moment, I was just laying there. I really didn't want to do it anymore. I really had, I was just laying there.
You had a sense of calmness because it was over?
Yeah. Then, you know, just to do this 2 or 3 month cycles before those photo shoots, it became like torture for me, you know. I remember I started to feel like I have more side effects than effects from that stuff. Blue, when after lat workouts, my back used to be like blue, you know, from small muscle tears all over the place. Something I never had before. I was not even that strong anymore. Suddenly, I was always a very strong bodybuilder, and I was just clearly focusing on other things. And that's why this happened, you know. So it's not, if I would have focused on bodybuilding, I can do 30 reps with 700 pounds of squats, you know, or I could, or 20 at least, you know. I was very, very strong in the squats. But when you don't focus, that's what happens.
Yeah. Gene, how do you train now?
Oh God, it's like, so 3 times a week. I always move the glutes. I always do some kind of stuff for the glutes, like a bikini girl. You know, I do some other time machine, hip thrust, or some kind of pushback machine every workout. And then kind of depending on what's free, it's as pathetic as that as it is, but what's free. So let me do some back, you know, 3 or 4 sets of pull downs, wide grip, small grip, a little bit of a rowing, maybe dumbbell rowing if I'm in a very good mood, and then a little bit of chest. So it's pretty much a half body every time, but lots of talking, lots of fun, you know.
do you use testosterone replacement therapy?
Yes, 100 milligram a week.
Okay.
Yeah, 100 milligram a week. And I only stop if I see in the blood results that the hemoglobin is a little high, the red blood cells.
Yep.
I never have an issue with any organs or anything like that, but I did over the years a couple of times. My hemoglobin was too high, so I stopped for a little bit, then go to the oncology center and draw blood for a few weeks. Still, it's back down in the 15, 16 range. But other than that, I never stop. I take my testosterone. I take regularly ACG with it. And then, like I told you before, a bunch of peptides. So I have a pretty extensive peptide program I run pretty much all year.
Okay, that's interesting. Very interesting. And tell us about your diet, what you were eating like when you were competing and what you do now.
So it was nothing special when I was competing. As a typical, rice, chicken. I was very big on fats. Early in, I couldn't keep up. I was very big into measuring my blood sugar. I always felt like if I have the perfect blood sugar numbers, like early morning, 2 hours after meals, that my body's absorbing the food properly. But when you're in the 300-pound range, you have to eat a lot of food. And if my blood sugar is still up, I don't know where, an hour before I have to eat again, so 2 hours after a meal, so then I knew I better supplement with fat. Yeah. It worked better for me. So I was never really crazy about protein. I ate 350 grams maybe a day. I was a very, very big guy. Occasionally 400, but 350. Okay. And the big mistake I made was I did not quite understand the difference between carbohydrate sources. That certain carbohydrate sources are not good for your gut. They will create visceral fat. Yeah. I was not understanding the difference between pasta, potatoes, rice. So I was a big, big pasta eater. I mean, just big. It could have been 3 times a day. Yeah. And I was a little bit more into nutrient timing than I am today, where I ate more on certain meals. I used insulin around the workouts. So I did eat a little bit more in the couple of post-workout meals. Today, with my athletes, I rather just supply, the same amount of carbs during the day. I don't really do a lot of nutrient timing, maybe a little bit around the workout with powdered carbohydrates. But back then I was a little bit bigger into the nutrient timing, but I ate a little bit more for breakfast, a little bit more in the 2 meals after workout when I used the insulin, and a little bit less carbs on the other meals. On those meals with the higher carbs, I used less fat. But all the other meals, I used lower carbs, moderate protein, and more fats. But there was no really secret, how I ate. I ate pretty clean all year back then. I did cardio all year. I did sprints all year, even back then. Same I do still today. I was very big into the theory that...
You do sprints?
Yeah, I do. I was very big in the theory that you should be able to reach your maximum heart rate, depending on your age.
Okay. And even with your knees and what you've had done, you have no problem sprinting?
Sprinting, it was sometimes on the bike or on a stepper. Okay. On a stepper. With sprinting, I mean more anything you need to do to reach your maximum heart rate. I could not sprint on a treadmill or so. Now I could.
That's what you do now on a bike?
Yes, I have a bike, and then when I drive to the gym or so, I do about 6 to 8 sprints up to maximum heart rate. So, I noticed that one of my early mentors explained to me is it's like a car, your body. If you have a car who can theoretically reach 7,000, 8,000 RPMs, but it's always locked up at 5,000. So you can never get the maximum out of a car. Yeah. So you need to be able that you're not just like a meathead, how he called it, that you also can really max out your engine. This will help you tremendously in your training, tremendously how you recover between sets. And you've seen it. I've seen it with workout partners back then, where they just, in the middle of the workout, the endurance starts to go down tremendously because they just can't recover, between sets. So I never had a problem with that, and I still take care of that today. And I have
When you were competing, did you do carb loading? Because even this thing that you're talking about with the fats, I look at fats and carbohydrates as energy sources. And sometimes, carbing up, if you don't include fats, they actually make no difference. Sometimes I've seen people carb up around the clock and they're 3 kilos lighter. And I believe it's because there were no fats involved.
Yeah, I used, specifically talking about this different carb ups I used. One of the carb ups I used on my days off. So on my days off, I started to do hypersaturation days. And I'm going to tell you also now, for everyone who's listening, even when I was 300 plus pounds, I never had any fat on me. When you see pictures of me, which people sometimes think, oh my God, he was fat here. When you really look at it, there's no real fat on the lower back or anything like that. It's just I stored more water.
Now that you've brought that up, finish that, but I wanted to ask you about that time with Albert Busek when you guest posed and you weren't in your best shape. He made a comment, and I thought that was very strange, because usually a promoter will try and just, promote positive things, but...
Let's also say it was a very strange time in German bodybuilding. Andy Münzer died. There was a very negative light on bodybuilding. So everybody with large size was considered being the next victim. So when Markus Rühl showed up, Markus Rühl did not win the overall at the German championship.
Okay. And
Markus looked unbelievable. So he was pretty much a joke. So they gave it to a little middleweight guy nobody ever heard of, and nobody would ever know the name if I mentioned it. So there was at that time I was invited to guest pose in Germany, and I was another 30, 40 pounds heavier at that point. It was very early in Markus' career than Markus. So Albert was, in that sense, already not very happy when I stepped on stage. So he went overboard to call me the dad of bodybuilding. But it was a very strange time in German bodybuilding, and big-sized guys. But again, the crowd was absolutely, they loved it, at least 2/3 of them. Yeah? And there are videos around of that guest posing, and if I would have taken a day of diuretics, it would have even looked pretty good. I was just very, very watery, but I never, ever, ever carried really much fat. I had 11% fat, was the highest I had in off-season. So I did carb up days on my days off from training, where I used longer-acting insulin in a little bit higher dose and just ate way more carbs, 8 times a day, cut the fat in half on those days. And then the carb up before the shows, I did never really understand how that works. Yeah. So it was a lot of, I think I carved up too much before shows. Yeah. And I did, I did not understand that you still need to drink, So a lot of us stopped drinking. But I always think when you're a 280-pound bodybuilder going on stage, it affects you different than a guy at 200 pounds when you stop the drinking. It just flattened me out completely. And what is very strange, when you're this big and you stop drinking and you pose to your mirror in the hotel room, it looks still very, very good. But then you start to lose that fullness, and you're 6 foot tall. I remember backstage, often when I saw Chris Cormier or Nasser, I took their fat. They were full, but not as lean as me. Okay. I was so lean when I went on stage, 96 Olympia. But then they kept their fullness. and I was flattening out from reducing the water so much. Then once I stepped on stage, he was just flat. So I looked way, way better after the depletion phase on Wednesday than after the loading phase. But there's all things with a little bit of professional help. It could have been arranged to get this right, but I was just too proud. And I was kind of like, well, next year I'll be so much bigger. And, I was always thinking in that terms, never like, why the hell? Why did this not work out exactly, So I was like, oh, look, I'm already 7th. The guys ahead of me are all 5 years old. The next year I'll come with 10 pounds more. It's just total strange thinking instead of learning really how to dial in, how to pose right. I never put any effort into posing. I mean, let me take this back. There are 2 aspects of posing the way I saw it. I could pose or hold my stomach in, stand in the lineup for an hour. Because I practiced that so much. And I posed so much during the preparation. So I could pose without breathing hard for 30 minutes. But I made so many mistakes when I practiced that it even intensified when I went on stage. So I never filmed my posing. I never had anybody around me who said, hey, your presentation looks like shit. And in a little bit my defense, when you look at the scorecard, it didn't matter. You were on the 5th place in the round 1, 2. You were pretty much on 5th place in the posing round. So, that didn't help me to improve my posing. But when I see a video now of my posing, there's not one turn done right. There's not one pose really done right, very sad in some way. So I pay a lot of attention today to my athletes and they get that part right,
Gene, what... you kind of like gave up even when you had the weirder contract. So you were just doing photo shoots. I wasn't aware that he was actually that kind. I heard some stories where, he made life a little bit hard for people. But it sounds like you did quite well. What was missing? Why did you not continue? I mean, you had the weirder contract. It seems like you had a good run. What in you made... So not give up, but not give 100% of what you could have.
Yeah. So in '99, I went to the Olympia in very bad shape. My physique started changing. I think from the constant bad food choices, overeating a little bit, I started to build up quite a bit of visceral fat in my stomach area. So I went to the Olympia. And a few weeks before the Olympia, I was more focused on my move to the United States. And 7-8 weeks before the Olympia, I realized I'm not in shape, and I'm so focusing on finding a house, moving. So I tried to kind of get out of it. And I thought, well, as it gets closer, I'm going to just make up something. And still a little bit on diet, but not really. Nasser told me 3 weeks before the Olympia. There's a video we did together. You can see it on YouTube. What the fuck? He said, what is going on? You're way too big, a nice way of putting it. So I called the Wieder office, said, look, it's too much stress. It's the move and everything. I got right away a letter from the Wieder lawyers. If you don't compete, your contract is gone. I just started to apply for the green card. So I did one of my biggest mistakes in my career. I went on stage out of shape. I had no interest of competing. I even showed the lack of interest up on stage. So then Ronnie Coleman won his 2nd title. My physique changed not to the better. And I lost that belief that I can really come back and beat Ronnie Coleman. Then I started to build my personal training business, enjoying America, made so much money. It was like a dream here where I live. And once I replaced that money I made with bodybuilding easily and I got the contract money on top of it, I just lost interest in injecting stuff and eating for 7, 8, and 9 places. I just lost my faith. You need to really want it. You need to really, really want it. And I always tell people about this one experience. When I was young, I went to a gym outside Zurich. We had to drive about half an hour to get there. It's all the athletes trained there. A friend, a mechanic, picked me up like at 7 p.m. Sometimes the guy was a few minutes late. I was like the caged animal at the side of the road, like cursing. I was like, I could not wait to get to the gym. You know, it was so much fun, and every workout was like growing. When it starts to like, oh God, I gotta go to the gym, you know. Oh God, you know. And then when you start to, you know, when I was young, taking steroids, and then you see anybody next to you dying. For me, it was like the guy's weak. He should never have been in bodybuilding. You know, what is wrong with this guy? It never happened to me. I'm an animal, you know. Yeah. But then when you start to realize, you know, I'm not going to be Mr. Olympia. I don't want to train like that anymore. It's going to be very hard to keep it together. Yeah. But then they keep paying you, and the green card starts dragging out and dragging out. You know, something is supposed to be 6 months to a year is now 2 years in. It's a total separate story what happened there. You know, it went as far that I even became a very short time illegal. I just lost interest. You know, I knew I can't win. Something I never felt early in. You know, early in, I didn't win. There was like, okay, I'm just like 6 months away from being the best in the world. That was gone after 99.
Gene, what next? What will you be aiming for next in your life? Have you got any plans, or?
You mean now or after I retired?
Now.
Yeah, I'm creating something very unique right now. I'm creating one of the best fitness app there's ever been. I'll come back on your show once it's ready. It should be ready in 3 months. It's a little bit too early. It's not that it's not out there, but it's going to be way better than anything is out there. It helps trainers to organize their training, to organize their clients. It helps trainers to pretty much train hundreds of people at the same time without betraying anybody. It's very unique. It's very complex. That's what I'm working on right now. Okay. And I have a very good business. I have some great athletes. I still, although I stopped for a while, I still back to one-on-one training 3 times a week because I enjoy it so much. And yeah, I can't wait for this to be out. And for years, I worked with animals. I worked in the shelter for years. I hope to be soon working at the zoo. Yeah, it's kind of enjoying life.
That is interesting. Gene, is there anybody you would like to thank? Your family, a gym, a coach, just some final words? Anybody that comes to mind?
Well, I don't have anybody to thank right now. My mother is dead. You know, I would like to thank her. The girlfriend who supported me back in my days hates my guts, so there's nothing to thank there really. People in my life now, they had nothing to do with that part of my life. But I want to tell to young people, you know, I mean, who are in this, you know, I train often people which are just, bodybuilding makes them in a way miserable. You know, they're just, I was a little bit there in certain years, 99, 2000. And it was always kind of in shock when I saw Ronnie and how much he enjoyed doing what he's doing. If you can't find a way to be happy and be a bodybuilder at the same time, and if you can't find a way to look like that without taking immense amount of steroids, you're in the wrong sport. You have to find a way to enjoy that. I was once sitting in a bar with Roland Churlock. We were both as miserable as it gets. And we were discussing that, would you be rather on this diet here on the European tour or in prison? So we both know the answer to it. That's not the way to do it. You know, if you want to be in this, you have to enjoy what you're doing. You have to find a way to be happy, and you have to find a way to get a body like that with the minimum amount of gear, or it will not work.
Gene, this is, I know it doesn't seem very long, but we've done an hour and you've said some very interesting things. And also, I stopped you in the middle of some very interesting stories. So I definitely need you back on this podcast. Definitely, I need to hear more from you because you're one of the most interesting people that I've come across.
Thank you.
Besides having a few similarities, you're the exact opposite of what I would have thought. You're quite smart. You've been quite measured throughout your whole career, from what I can see. So no wonder you're such an excellent coach, and doing really well with it. So whatever it is that you're going to do, I think you do things very well thought out, and you continue to inspire me.
Thank you, and I love to come back at any time. Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched you throughout your career, and I was always hoping that you would take the next big step. But after talking to you and finding out your background and how you think, everything you've said really resonates, and you've just come across like a really good human being.
Thank you. Thank you.
And look, it was my pleasure. It was obviously too short, this interview. You've got some exciting things happening, and you've got some changes coming up. So there's definitely more room for us to talk and find out. I think people will find you very interesting. And I'm not even sure if today's bodybuilders have this sort of personality where, that they could actually discuss everything the way you have. You've opened up about everything. You've hidden nothing. I didn't even have to ask you. You've just opened right up, and I think people will love that.
Very good. Thank you so much for having me. Actually, I'm heading to a hockey game right now.
Okay. Well, enjoy yourself, and let's stay in touch.